Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the City of Muskegon City Commission work session for Monday, December 13th, 2021. Please be advised that item number 3, inclusive zoning proposal, has been removed until further notice. At this time, Mr. Alexander, you're here for the social district report and plan, correct? Why don't we jump to that, unless there was somebody here for the CSXT purchase agreement? Not at this time. Okay, so Mr. Alexander, go right ahead and begin walking us through item number 2, if you would.
Thank you, Mayor. Welcome, Mayor and Commissioners. I feel a need to come back to you after about 15 months since you unanimously approved our social district for downtown. Here to report on what we have done since you did that back in August of 2020, and then also when we opened it up in September of that year, and sort of a suggestion from staff as to where we'd like to go for 2022. First off, we are pleased with the operations and finances. We have also, in the time frame of this last year, opened up a second social district. Much different in nature and in size in Lakeside with 2 establishments, whereas we have about 12 blocks and probably 23 establishments, of which 18 have been active participants. We sold an estimated 123,000 drinks into the social district the first year. Of those, 77,500 were sold at special event prices, which is 62% of the total over the course of the year. So we can really see where special events drive the social district activity and the social district's participation and bringing people downtown. That sticker and cup revenues, it created $73,000, which is an average of 60 cents per cup. And we had a dual, a bit confusing for all of us as we were trying to work through this cost structure. First off, we wanted to do cups. There is a cup shortage, and we wanted to do compostable green cups. There's really a shortage of those. We did have 45,000 of them that we've used, but of those 123,000 drinks, the rest of them were just done with stickers on the cups provided by the establishments, and they had to be co-branded, so they had to have either a sticker or a logo on that cup. Has to be plastic, and it has to be not more than 16 ounces. Our average cost for the year, I said, was 60 cents. We went from 25 cents on a normal time frame like this would be the cost of a sticker to $1 for the special events that we had during the summer. I'm very pleased to announce that the Muskegon Police Department had never contacted me once during the course of the social district operations. There were obviously issues. There was not 100% uniform adherence to all of the rules and regulations, but there were no major incidences, and I do not believe that we caused any health or safety concerns with downtown or those who live, work, and play in the downtown. Understand that when we charge for social district stickers, we are doing so to cover the costs that the city has. The city is not making money and will not and cannot, under LCC regulations, make money on the social districts. So we met with the social district stakeholders and establishments back on November 30th and had a pretty good turnout that morning, in which we discussed for about an hour and a half their thoughts as to how the program's working and where we would want to go for it in 2022. Staff has come to a recommendation that will be on your agenda tomorrow night, that we would do only stickers and get out of the cup business, and that there would be one sticker price year-round, and that we would set that, we're asking you to set that at 75 cents, which is a increase, but not as much of an increase as potentially we could do if we wanted to cover all of the costs the city incurs for downtown events. And as we went through this, we discovered here in the COVID world, post-COVID world, that as operations come out of events such as the Chamber of Commerce and what was the limitations to the social districts as relates to nonprofit special event licenses for beer tents, that the city has stepped in and picked up a lot of costs. We would not have had a Rebel Road on Western Avenue as we have grown to love and appreciate if it wasn't for the city to step in and make that happen. And obviously there's a lot of cost to that. With the signage and security, the stickers, sanitation issues, it would leave us at 75 cents with the same number of sales that we had last year, with about $32,000 to help us out with special event costs such as police, fire, street closings, fireworks, and the rest. Staff would like to explore, so that's what's going to be on your agenda tomorrow night, but in the future, we would like to explore with you and with the downtown community and stakeholders expansion of the district in 22. But we wait, and maybe one of our guests here tonight would be able to help us on House Bill 5090, which was legislation proposed by the coalition of West Michigan Chambers of Commerce, including Muskegon, Lakeshore Chamber of Commerce, and the Detroit Coalition of Chambers of Commerce, along with the Michigan Downtowns Association that I'm involved with, are asking for the nonprofit special event licenses, the beer tents, when they are put into a social district, that doesn't mean that the social district has to shut down. That would get us, if you were willing to approve that and send that recommendation on to the LCC, we could have an island carved out for a beer tent, say for Rebel Road, and allow the Child Abuse Council to operate that, or other such functions. And we do not yet have a decision on House Bill 5090. It would also go ahead and take away the 5-year sunset on the law, so there would be a open-ended and which would be good for about the 75 or so communities across the state, along with Muskegon, that have, in some form or fashion, used the social district in terms of their downtowns. So with that, at the same time, those that are north of, and I know we had a conversation, an initial suggestion that we wanted to cross Shoreline Drive to the north, since there were 3 licenses up there, and actually a 4th because the Mart Dock has a license for operation of the Aquastar. And I believe they were represented at the meeting that we had, in all of them. Parkland and Pigeon Hill would like to explore that. As Michael Brower from Pigeon Hill says, they're already crossing the street with the cups. They can tell that as Pigeon Hill has opened up their new operation for food and beverage in their production facility north there on 3rd Street at the Shoreline Drive. So with that, we would like to come in the future, in the first months after we figure out what we would do, because I think it would also have implications, that law would, for how we deal with Hackley Park and parties in the park going forward. I think we need to think that through after we see what the final legislation, if it were to be adopted and signed by the governor, it has made its way through first committee and recommended and sent to the House floor. And hopefully the House will act on that and get it over to the Senate for us to make some plans for the summer of 2022. So we're recommending a 75-cent social district sticker fee. That is on your agenda tomorrow, and that we would come back with the other expansion and district issues. I'd like to only go to the LCC once to have a reformulation of the district plan once we decide how that might be configured with that law in effect. I would end by saying that I think we've created one of the largest, most dynamic, and I think staff believes successful social districts in the state. It has had an impact on business in the COVID world, It has had a impact on continuing the transformation of downtown, the vibe that we are creating, the fun that we're having as a community in watching our downtown grow and expand. And I would like to thank you for your initial support of the social district and also the establishments that have made it happen, especially their dedicated staff. They had some horrendous nights in terms of just having staffing issues and having large crowds. And so these people really worked hard on all of our behalf to be good, a welcoming community to those, both locals and visitors who partake in our events downtown. And it also, the patrons that come here, we want to thank them for their patronage, and we would hope that we would have a bigger and better situation going next year. Finally, I want to make one, especially with all the wind that went down, I don't want to see where all the signs are at because they're not all standing where they used to be at. We're going to be transitioning from wind signs to street markings and permanent on posts, or we will work with Leo and DPW to figure out what the best way for that is. But in the budget, there is funds for permanent markings on the streets. We will still use the street signs or the wind signs that are there, especially for special event times and maybe in some critical entry points to the social district going forward. So with that, you do have something on the agenda for tomorrow. I've given a sort of a summation with that, my memo in your agenda packet tonight with the finances from this past year and what we foresee in the future for the 75 cents in 2022.
Okay.
Here to answer any questions? Or
Thank you so much for riding herd on this enterprise. I do feel it's been a great benefit to our business districts, and will continue to be so in the coming years and months, and hopefully with some adjustments at the state level, legislatively and otherwise, it can be a easier lift, for all of us, and we'll see additional benefit. Any question for Mr. Alexander from the commission at this juncture? We do know that there's item tomorrow for our consideration for passage. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Are the costs for the cup stickers going up for both districts as well?
yeah, I think we have a uniform. There may be other social districts proposed in this city going forward, and I think it's best that we have a uniform. And you may think that's a lot for the fine two establishments in Lakeside. Understand that they've got a lot of stickers still in hand because they're not using a lot. And we've probably spent about $5,000 getting that one underway. And it'll take them a little while. And hopefully a couple of more establishments will be out there. One is for sale, and hopefully that license sale will go through, and we'll have a new establishment in the Lakeshore Tavern facility. But there's are also obviously others of the buildings that are for sale. There are some potential new licenses coming into that district.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, I agree with the sensibility of uniformity for that. And I know that the folks in Lakeside would like to do more events, and it'd be good to build up some resources to support them with those events in Lakeside as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you, guys.
Alexander. It's Mr. Snyder. You're here to join us this evening. And if you just give your name and address, and
Thank you.
of course your formal title.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Will Snyder, 1445 Winchester, and with the Office of State Representative Terry Sabo. Unfortunately, Representative Sabo could not be here tonight, and neither one of us can be here tomorrow for the open house reception honoring yourself and Commissioner Rinsa Masibinga for your years of service to the city. And Representative Sabo is in Lansing tonight in budget negotiations as we prepare to pass a series of supplemental budget bills tomorrow before we break for the holiday recess. But I just wanted to stop by tonight and present to you both a couple of state tributes signed by our Muskegon legislative delegation and the governor, thanking you for your many years of service to our hometown. Jobs like these are sometimes very, we don't get a lot of thanks. And your dedication, both of you, for your 20 years and 8 years of service to our hometown does not go unnoticed. And even though your time in elected office is coming to a close for now, we know that both of you aren't going anywhere and will continue to be very, very active in our progress for the city of Muskegon and our hometown. So we want to thank your families for sharing you with us for the last many years. And we know that we will remain in very capable hands with our incoming mayor and our incoming commissioners. But tonight we just wanted to say thank you. So with that being said, I'm just going to kind of paraphrase because these are very, very similar. But let it be known that it is with a strong sense of admiration for all the sacrifices that you both have made on behalf of the people of Muskegon that we salute Mayor Stephen J. Garland and Commissioner Dan Rinsma-Siebinga on your retirement from public office here in Muskegon. This marks an end of an era of effectiveness and efficiency in public service. We thank both of you individuals on this occasion with the confidence that Muskegon will long benefit for your service. In special tribute, therefore, these documents are signed and dedicated to honor and thank you both for your work. May health and happiness be in both of your futures. And these are signed by Representative Sabo, Senator Bumstead, the Lieutenant Governor, and the Governor. So, thank you very much, both of you.
Wow. Thank you, Will. And thank Representative Sabo and anybody else you run into in Lansing.
Definitely will.
Definitely will. Very nice. Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
Oh.
Lower. It's as low as I can go.
And I just want to mention, Dave mentioned, I'll go back to the microphone. Yes. Dave mentioned the social district bill, I believe it's 5090, was voted out of House Committee on Reg Reform in late October, and it was near unanimously voted out of the House before we went on hunting break or Thanksgiving break, whatever we want to call it, in early November. There was over 100 yes votes, so it is in the Senate now, waiting action in Senate regulatory reform. As we go into an election year, I don't know how long it will take for that to continue to move forward, but very positive progress on that bill. So thank you all.
Thank you, Will. Thank you so very much. That brings us to item number 1. Working our way back.
Yeah.
The CSXT purchase agreement. Mr. Manager.
Okay, so this is probably, it seems like 2-3 years in the works or in the making to get to this point. I think a lot of you guys are familiar with it, but to kind of refresh your memory, the rail line that kind of runs from the former YMCA all the way out to the west has been very seldomly used over the past 8 to 10 years, although there has been a little bit of vacant rail car storage on there, but other than that, there's really not been much on there. And for the most part, it's been more of a hindrance to getting things done in our community. I'll give you an example. Just recently at Hartshire Marina Village, they needed to put, I think, a water line under there that was directionally bored under there, and I think it cost them like $20,000 or more just for a one-time crossing agreement to get underneath that track. And when you have tracks like this that separate key developable or usable pieces of property from the rest of the community, they become a little bit of a hindrance or an obstacle, at least. And it's been very consistent. I think we've been trying to get good internet at the marina for a number of years now, and it's just expensive to cross that. So you can imagine what we deal with over here, all the different issues that have presented themselves all up and down the line. Well, one of the issues that presented itself was the redevelopment of the former Sappy property or the Windward Point property. And they've essentially brought in a number of developers, a number of investors that were very interested, but every single one, dollar for dollar, has been unwilling to move forward until the railroad was gone. Mostly because they were worried that some point in the future it could be used to store rail cars like it had been in the recent past. And so it's really killed a number of deals. The group tried to work with a number of different agencies. They tried to go through the U.S. reps. They tried to go through go the political route. And what we really found was that there was only one way to get it done, and that would be to work directly with CSX and get them to agree that this was a good thing to go forward. And that's when they kind of handed it over to me. And my job was to get a hold of the right people at CSX and negotiate an agreement. And when I say negotiate, that price that's in here, $1,648,000, that price was not negotiable. So there's a lot of things to negotiate. That was not one of them that they were willing to negotiate. They had an assessment done of the value of it to them, and it's strictly based on the value of them to use it, not a real estate value. It's not a true, go that we think the real estate is worth $1.648 million, but that's their value based on some leases that they have with Genesee and Wyoming, and then some opportunity to lease additional space on there to, typically for unused railroad car storage. And so that was something that was not negotiable. Now, what became negotiable were how they were willing to move on from it. So they have a lot of concerns about things like environmental, hazards and stuff like that, unknowns at least. And then they have a lot of concerns about whether or not the Surface Transportation Board would even allow them to give up, a single line that's a spur that's, miles long, just because it's really hard to collect that kind of stuff back up if you ever need it in the future. Sappy, Windward Point and Pure Muskegon tried for many years to just buy their portion, right? They didn't really care. None of us really cared so much about the stuff that was to the east of there. There wasn't as big of a need to do it, but CSX was pretty steadfast in that they were not going to go through this just for the Windward Point portion. They wanted somebody to purchase all of it. The problem was, when you looked at all of it, we were like 68% of the land user. So the way we calculated that was who owns land on one side or the other of the track. And for the most part, aside from really just a handful of property owners, it was us. All along the bottom of the hill, down there along the bike path is ours. So much of it was ours. And there were some pieces of it that obviously abutted Windward Point as well. And so what you have here is a pretty complicated deal, and complicated enough to where we had, if you recall, we hired a special law firm out of Chicago to help us negotiate this and kind of get through this. And I will have to say, Janet and Robert, the two people who worked with us the most, they were very, very helpful. And at the same time, they were very, very surprised that we got this far, because they did not expect it to go as well as it did. So I do have to give at least a little bit of credence to CSX. They wanted to get this done for us. They saw the value in getting the land redeveloped. So what you end up with is essentially the city's going to be purchasing the property. And there are two different types of property on there. And it's kind of hard to see on this map right here. But there were certain pieces of the line that CSX owned. There were certain pieces of the line that CSX just had easements over, but the original property owners still owned. And then there were a couple little segments where we weren't really sure, like nobody really knew. The records weren't good enough, but CSX said they owned it and the property owner said they owned it. And, and if that kind of disagreement existed, there probably wasn't going to get anywhere through the Surface Transportation Board. And so, but the two big pieces that were still owned by the underlying property owner were, luckily for us and luckily for them, were the Windward Point property and were the country club property next door. Pretty much everything else, which is mostly ours, was stuff that CSX had easement over. They did not have deed ownership of. And you can kind of see it on here, not very well, but there's like a dotted line that says where they have ownership rights. And there are very few pieces of it, especially none of it right in here where the green and the yellow is. So what this effectively does, it cleans up the line from the split point at the old YMCA all the way to the end. It requires us to leave the vast majority of it up through the Grand Trunk dock in one piece, and we enter into what's called a trail use arrangement. So they agree to allow us to use it for a trail, and really not much more other than that. But the big thing is we then start to control the crossings and things like that. So we do take ownership of all the crossing arrangements, and we can either issue them or not issue them. We can require them or not require them. going forward. And then everything from the west, most everything from the west will revert to ownership of the underlying property owners, which would be Pure Muskegon and the Country Club Group. And then there's a little bit of cleanup that happens kind of on the other side of Taurus and Marine. That looks like it runs up towards the filter plant, and that becomes trail as well. We think that's mostly either currently bike trail. You can't tell from their map because their map is pretty bad, but it's either currently bike trail or it's Lakeshore Drive. But either way, it's in public right away. There are a number of easements starting on, I think, page 22, or crossing agreements. There's 3 pages of crossing agreements. We'll essentially inherit these crossing agreements. A number of them are probably no longer valid, especially the ones from the 1916 and the older ones where the companies don't exist anymore. But other ones, they probably still are valid, and those ones we probably can get the owner of that crossing arrangement to contribute at least something to the closure of the line. We have had conversations with both Consumers Energy and DTE, and they both expressed that they have at least some history in doing stuff like this, and it's typically been somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 years. So if they're paying, say, for one of these, if they're paying $1,000, a year, they'll typically contribute up to 10 years of that towards the purchase price to make it go away. But at the end of the day, we won't know what any of these look like until we sign, because they will not share these with us until we have a signed agreement. So we know they exist, but we just don't know how much, what kind of value they generate. My guess is they generate something, which is probably what pushed up the cost of the purchase price. So there's kind of a lot to go through here. But the big thing is this is the only thing that will open the door to get the Sapu property redeveloped. We know there's probably some opportunities to talk to those developers about what a contribution might look like to this project. And we're willing to have those conversations with them. But there's also opportunities to talk to places like Consumers Energy and DTE, and potentially even our water and sewer utilities, who likely have crossing agreements mixed in here somewhere as well, to kind of defray the cost. We also think there's an opportunity to get some brownfield TIF under property acquisition related to Windward Point. And then Pete's going to do a good job for me to dig up any infrastructure money that might exist, because we think, as much as I say in here, ARPA money, we think that really what we're going to tell you guys are federal grant money. We got 6 months of due diligence here to try to find a better revenue source. So if there's infrastructure money, if there's parks money, if those things do present themselves over the next 6 months, then we'll probably make a recommendation that we use one of those, especially if the ARPA money is just more flexible than what those are. So we're open to figuring out other better funding sources, but right now we think that because it's likely to be fully reimbursable through brownfield TIF, whichever one of those funding sources, they're just a temporary funding source, and we'll get fully reimbursed when it's all said and done. Now, Michael, I noticed you had a reaction when I said something about it had to be a trail use agreement.
Yeah.
I think that's par for the course. I think if you were to look at a number of them, even a lot of places where there's no line anymore, in Muskegon and other places, the trail use agreement is a preferred method by the Surface Transportation Board to ensure that in the event something changes in the future and rail service is needed out there, it's really easy to convert it back into a rail line. Not at our expense, obviously, but if we think that this is one of those instances where it's never going to happen, right? Because they're going to develop these things into lots of non-industrial uses.
Right.
But you can imagine, like, there's some places in and around the Port City Industrial Park where rail lines used to be, and they're no longer. But the rail corridors are still intact if you look at them on maps. Where the right user comes in there that needs rail access and is going to ship a significant amount of product via rail, where they would be able to demand that rail line be reinstalled and put back into use. So we don't think it's going to happen here, but it's it's just part of the process, part of the game that we have to play. Good news is, like I was telling Commissioner Johnson, is we do have a path that's been known to flood a little bit. And over time, the more of it we can put up into this, I don't think we have a history of this train track flooding out, in times of high water. So it could actually put us in a better position long term to where our path is in maybe a more sustainable, more manageable a bed or location. So with all that said, I'll take some questions from.
Did you have
folks.
anything additional to that?
Yeah. So you're going to have to forgive me. This is a lot of things that are way outside of my wheelhouse, but I appreciate and support it, and I think that it's necessary for us to move forward as a community and do this. So we get to pay them $1.6 million and they get to tell us what to do with this piece of property? Okay, I just want to put that out there so everybody hears it the same way that I do.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So that's what it is. Again, I support it because I think it's important to continue to develop our downtown in a way that is more neighbor-centric. It is great. You just spoke to moving parts of the path, which I think is awesome in the event that it happens, but I wouldn't want to see those parts of the path that typically do flood be taken away. Just have them there, and there's a detour now, an emergency route, if you will. That would be great. So for the easements that are going back to the country club and to Pure Muskegon, have we spoke to them about contributing to this, and what are they saying?
We've spoken kind of broadly about them, and I think they're interested in making contributions. The hard part is, like I said, they're really like a smaller piece of the puzzle. So whether it's $100,000 or a couple $100,000, we'll probably would gladly take it, but I wouldn't expect that it'd be millions of dollars.
No, yeah, and I wouldn't either. I just think that being a part of the process, and maybe even more, and this is going to probably get me some flack, maybe even more of the country club than Pure Muskegon right now because of the lack of development on that property, and maybe there's a lack of income. I'm unsure about that. It's not my business. But I mean, some a percentage would be nice, even if it's not great. Thank you for the kind gesture. We'll take your money.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I think this is great, and I don't have any questions beyond that. If you feel comfortable with it and staff feels comfortable with it, I'm excited for this. I'm excited for it to be done and gone. I'm excited for it to be a trail and really to reduce those barriers that we have to that property, so that it looks more like a part of the extension of our downtown in that neighborhood.
The most important thing that we'll need the Pure Muskegon folks to do is to, again, let us be at or near the top of the brownfield reimbursement process, right? Because our big thing is they're going to build stuff, it's going to generate taxes, and then it's going to get captured to pay for eligible expenses. Our big thing is if we're at the top of the eligible expense list or near the top of the eligible expense list, we'll get paid back faster that way. And at that point, it won't matter if it comes from a check from them or a check from the Brownfield Authority,
right?
Because for them, it'll become an eligible expense as well. So, then they'll just be capturing, if they give us $200,000 and we have $1.4 million, they'll be capturing their $200,000 back the same way that we're capturing our $1.4 million dollars back anyway.
Okay, last question, and then you can move on to someone else, Mr. Mayor. And thank you, Mr. Manager. Does this have any effect on the marina, on Hartshorn, or anything like that at all?
Yeah.
Good or bad?
Good.
I mean, obviously
Yeah.
good because of the reasons that I've stated. But
Oh,
is there anything that we need to be concerned about that maybe I'm not reading specifically about its effect on the marina that could compromise any of that property?
No. It'll be good because if you notice how they developed over there, there's one entry point to that's kind of maybe further to the west that, as part of this process, I think we determined was kind of unauthorized crossing. And it's kind of, it was there. I think the assumption was it was authorized. Ted Vercano thought it was authorized all these years, and probably it's not been necessarily authorized. And it's kind of important to the development, so it'll allow us to move forward with the development without any additional cost to get a true crossing there. And it did come up. The reason we found out about it was title due diligence, the title work. The banks, we're looking at loaning on the project, and we're having trouble finding the second true entry point into that development. And it turns out that we don't really think that it exists. Now we can make sure that it exists. So that's a positive thing.
Great.
As well as we won't have an opportunity to have boxcars parked in the Nibs neighborhood again, like we did one year.
And like I said, the hard part will be there might be a certain piece of this that we don't like the language on, but at the end of the day, this is mostly language that's been developed over time that I think that CSX is comfortable will get through the Surface Transportation Board, especially because it's mutually agreeable. One thing that's not that maybe I need to make sure I point out, there's a letter in here from Genesee, a letter of agreement with Genesee and Wyoming, essentially. Um, Genesee and Wyoming leases the track from CSX, and Genesee and Wyoming, what was the first hurdle that we had to get over? We had to convince them um, to let their lease go for no cost, right? Because they had a lot of time and effort invested in that lease, and they have money that they can make off that lease, like if they want to store frac sand cars and things like that. And what we kind of settled on was there are a couple of crossings in the city limits that we agree and they agree need to be resurfaced. And so we essentially said that we'll put them in our budget the next funding round as a recommendation to you folks to get them done. And so at the end of the day, they were probably our responsibility to do anyway. And this was the one thing that they really wanted to make sure happened if they were willing to give it up. And they're out of the Grand Rapids area, and they're very good to work with. Neither one of these railroad companies wanted to be the reason why when we're pointing to get done.
Very good. Commissioner German, I believe you had.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Question for the city manager. That $40,000, that filing fee, that the city's going to pay that also, and that survey line that we see on the map, that's the line that they're talking about that's been surveyed. Are you looking at an hourly rate?
Yeah. So let me find the map on here, and I'll try to show you. So they're going to survey. The big thing that we're paying for to survey are the red things you see in here. These red ones are going to be are what we're going to survey. Most of the Windward Point property and the Country Club property have already been surveyed, and so they've agreed to make those available to us, so we don't have to resurvey them. So, and I believe they've already shared them with our land surveyor. So we'll save quite a bit of time and money by skipping essentially that mile and a half there. And the hard part is they couldn't really give us a price. It's going to be very labor intensive to figure out where this line was. So they have published rates, and we just agreed to pay their published rates. And hopefully they get it done quickly. We'll be on them to get it done quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Emily, anything?
I'm just big sigh of relief that we're finally at the end of this very, very long dark tunnel with this railroad track, and can't wait to see what we can do with it. I just, it's. I'm sure the people of Pure Muskegon are very happy, also, to be able to go forward with their property. So, thank you, Frank, and everybody that was involved with finally coming to an end to this. I do have one small question. Who will be taking out the railroad tracks?
CSX will. They'll have. So we have essentially from the day we signed this, we have 180 days for a due diligence period, and then from the day we close, they have 180 days to get the tracks out. So sometime if we use our whole 180 days and they use their whole 180 days, it could be a year from now by the time they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
But our goal is to shorten our due diligence period as much as possible, and they've agreed to shorten theirs as much as possible as well.
Good.
So it could be pretty quick.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Anything, Commissioner Johnson?
Yeah, to echo Commissioner Emery, thank you for your efforts, Frank, and our staff, our team. Has been quite an ordeal, a lot of time and effort and energy going into getting it to this point. So it's exciting that we are here and making progress and being able to unlock new development opportunities. Like Commissioner Ramsey, I did have some pause when I saw the restrictive covenants and not being able to use for anything but trail, on the primary premises that we're acquiring, the city's acquiring. But you explained why that's the case, and it's not so much of a concern for our long-term use and development. So that helped put my mind at ease. With regard to defraying the cost to the city, which looking at about $1.6 million, you mentioned the possibility of potentially Pure Muskegon kicking in. Are we looking at working with all of the property owners that adjoin it on them kicking in something, whether up front to defray the cost, or what happens with the access agreements and the fees they've been paying thus far on an annual basis for that? Will those carry forward to us, and then it's up to us when to terminate them or reduce them or adjust them? Like, what's your outlook there with regard to the access agreements and fees that generate from?
So those would all be assigned to us.
Okay.
My goal would be, I mean, unless there's some of them that are very lucrative and we decide we want to keep them. The problem is we're different than the railroad, and we want to partner with these landowners, not necessarily, be a hindrance to them. So my goal would be to come to you folks and say, okay, these ones are no good. These ones are gone. They don't use them anymore. It's 100 years old. These ones are still in place, and this is what we've negotiated for them to essentially buy out and then just have that access without needing a crossing agreement. I mean, we typically wouldn't have that in many of our situations where we would have a crossing agreement. And so I don't foresee a need to continue to have them. And I think that's been kind of part of the wait and see of this before we talk to Pure Muskegon or any of the property owners about how much they should contribute until we see what those are, because do these generate tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, to go towards the purchase price? And we just don't know until we sign this and then they send them over to us. One thing that John Schreier was pretty confident about were a lot of the property owners that own on one side are like the houses, like kind of up at the top of the hill up there. And he didn't think that we could probably justify charging them really anything. Because it's so inconsequential to their house. It's like on the edge of their property, and preferably, we want to keep it, right? So the idea of trying to make them charge half of it, and then what do we do? Do we still run our path down the middle of it when we made like Teresa pay for half of what was in front of her house? Mm-hmm. It seemed like the cleanest thing to do and those ones in particular were to not even consider asking any of those folks for a contribution. Okay. Although someone would probably gladly contribute something to make sure that the trains don't go down there anymore. Mm-hmm. It would be hard. John thought it would be hard to demonstrate a true value to them. Outside of the cars come once every 6 or 8 years. It's not, and they're not too nuisancey even when they are there.
Yeah, no, that's understandable.
So the couple that we could talk about would be maybe Hartshorn Marina Village, for example. Mm-hmm. Maybe through Adelaide Point, maybe. Actually, the marina, and then probably though when you get down it, outside of those, there's probably not much else. There's the condos behind Kohl's, and then everything else runs along mostly our our property, and that's it was pretty eye opening. We thought the same thing. We're going, okay, if we could just get everybody to chip in $2 a linear foot, we could pay for this thing. And then when we really started to look at it, we were going, oh, well, we're seriously 3/4 of it ourselves. So, then it was starting to become much harder to even to justify finding 25% of the money. Was it worth the fight with some of these folks to get that little bit out of them?
So what's your outlook or timeline for having those conversations with the property owners that have existing access agreements and pay those fees, as well as with Pure Muskegon in terms of what that arrangement might look like? And so what's kind of your outlook or timeline?
Well, as soon as I get my hands on those, I'll need a little bit of time. We'll need a little bit of time. My guess is probably 60 days or more. I mean, it's going to take a little bit of time. I would say we should probably want to know if any of that's going to happen before we close, right? So we have 180 days, and that might not be due diligence for this, for CSX, but it might be part of our due diligence, to make our decision whether or not we close.
Yeah.
Thing to take in mind though, we'll have hard money down, right? It's $163,000 or something like that. So we'll have to decide, if for some reason, we're not going to close on it or extend it or whatever. There will be costs involved.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So with the conversations with Pure Muskegon, I can imagine that it's not necessarily going to be entirely financial, of like how maximum value we can extract from them to defray this, but also perhaps what kind of commitments they have to having waterfront public access as part of the development, or
different
putting the trail, closer to the waterfront or differently on their property. It's going to take on many forms,
Yep.
Not just financial.
Yep, and that's kind of the hard part is, we're pretty sure that they're not going to develop it, right? And they want to make sure that they're not making commitments that are going to be problematic for the new, for whatever development group comes in. So it's really going to be a matter of all of us, agreeing to work essentially in the best interest of the community, to make sure that those trailways, which we're going to require, right, because we do that anyway in our PUDs, are in places that are, for sure, they'll be better than where they are now, right, because they're way up. Whether they all get along the waterfront or some get along the waterfront, or, I could think that that's probably something that will really have to be driven by, the third party that doesn't, that we don't know of right now.
Okay.
But hopefully, the nice thing is, once this is signed and ready to go, then they can have more thoughtful conversations with developers again.
Speaking of the PUD, do we have any kind of idea as to how soon that may come to us? That's still just a very
Yeah, I think every buyer that's been very close, none of them are actively engaged right now because of the railroad.
okay.
The railroad was just taking so long. So once I think this is signed and there's light at the end of the tunnel, then I think we can convince them to get those conversations going again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anything else, commissioners? Okay, very good. Well, looking forward to a successful completion of this purchase and taking this into our own portfolio for multiple reasons, mainly for the sake of the entire community, as well as the potential developments which also benefit the community. But it puts this to rest, and face it, we don't need that type of presence any longer along our waterfront. And I think this will give us a lot more flexibility in providing a better lakefront experience for everybody. Well, that is all for business this evening. At this time, we open up for public comment. Any member of the public is welcome to come forward and make 3 minutes of comment. All we need is your name and address. We don't engage in dialogue or debate at this time. If there are any particular questions or need to get in touch with your appropriate elected official or appropriate department head or staff member, please stay behind and we can point you in the correct direction for that type of contact. Are there any members of the public that would like to address the commission at this time? If not, Mr. Ramsey would like to take us home.
Yes. What am I supposed to say?
I move to adjourn.
Oh, I moved to adjourn.
Support.
It's been moved by Commissioner Ramsey and supported by Commissioner Johnson and Emily to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
In opposition? Okay, thank you, everybody.